Welcome, everyone, to this fantastic session from panels to publishing, featuring some of our most talented NCS members. We have Mark Tertulli, Rob Harrell, Maria Scrivan, and Terry Liebenson here with us today. We're talking about their success in publishing books, having started a career as syndicated newspaper cartoonists, in particular panel and comic strip cartoonists. To introduce you to our talented guests today, I am going to read some bios because it's important that you know who they are and what they do. Starting with Mark Tertulli, who is an internationally syndicated cartoonist, best known for his popular comic strip Heart of the City and Leo, Heart of the City, which he recently stopped doing and handed off to Steens. The comic strips appear in 400 newspapers all over the world. Leo has been nominated for Germany's 2010 Max and Moritz Award and multiple times for the National Cartoonist Society's Best Comic Strip, winning in 2009. Mark has also been nominated numerous times for Cartoonist of the Year by the NCS, including this year. Congratulations, Mark, on your nomination, by the way. A Leo animated television series is currently in the works. Mark has now expanded his cartooning and writing into middle grade kids' books, making the illustrated novel series Desmond Puckett for Andrews McMeel Publishing. He also wrote and illustrated two picture books, Daydreaming and They Came, for Roaring Brook Press, a Macmillan company. He's currently working on two graphic novels for Little Brown Books for young readers, Short and Skinny, a memoir of Mark's life in the summer of 1977, and The Big Break, a story about the challenges of a middle school boy's friendship. In addition to this cartooning experience, Tertulli is also an accomplished filmmaker and animator, and is the recipient of the 3 Emmy Awards for his prior work in television. Mark lives in Spielbergian development in New Jersey, Steven Spielberg, with his wife, Donna, and a couple of nefarious cats. Nefarious cats, by the way? What's nefarious about the cats, Mark? What are we, why are they nefarious? What are we talking about?
All cats are nefarious. All cats are certainly nefarious.
Okay. Next up, we have Maria Scrivan. Maria is an award-winning syndicated cartoonist and New York Times best-selling author. Her comic Half Full appears daily in newspapers nationwide, including the LA Times and Chicago Tribune, and on GoComics.com. Maria's cartoons have appeared in Mad Magazine, Parade, Highlights, Wired, and many other publications, and she licenses her work for hundreds of greeting cards. Maria's debut middle-grade graphic novel, Nat Enough, was released in April 2020, and her forthcoming follow-up, Forget Me Nat, will be available on September 1st, 2020. Visit Maria online at mariascrivan.com or on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. She's just at Maria Scrivan. Welcome, Maria.
Hi, Jason. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Next up, we have Terry Liebenson. Terry is a New York Times best-selling children's book author and award-winning cartoonist of the syndicated daily comic strip, The Pajama Diaries, which ran from 2006 to this year, 2020. She was also an award-winning humorous card writer for American Greetings. Terry graduated from Washington University in St. Louis with a BFA in illustration and a minor in art history. She developed her first professional comic strip, Got a Life, in 2000, which was distributed by King Features Weekly Service. The Pajama Diaries launched with King Features in 2006 and ran in hundreds of newspapers internationally until its retirement this year. Pajama Diaries has been nominated 4 times for the Reuben Award for Best Newspaper Comic Strip by the National Cartoonist Society and won the 2016 award for Best Comic Strip. Terry is currently a New York Times bestselling author of the middle grade series Emmy and Friends and Belzer and Bray. Born and raised in Kingston, Pennsylvania, Terry lives with her husband and 2 daughters in Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome, Terry.
Hello, and
good to have you here.
Thank you.
And our 4th panelist is the one and only Rob Harrell. Rob wrote and drew the syndicated daily comic strip Big Top through 2007 and currently creates the long-running strip Adam at Home. Harrell wrote and illustrated the graphic novel Monster on the Hill, published by Top Shelf, the story of a town with a down-on-his-luck monster. Monster was the inspiration for the animated movie Rumble in 2021, next year, from Paramount Pictures, which is very exciting. Next, Harrell wrote the Life of Zarf trilogy of hybrid novels, published by Dial Books for young readers. They tell the story of Zarf Belford, a troll attending a middle school in a fairy tale world. Harold's next book is Wink, the funny but heartfelt story of Ross Malloy, a 7th grader dealing with a horrible diagnosis and cancer treatments, all while trying to blend in and adjust and survive in middle school. As an illustrator, Harold has worked with clients including Mad, Simon & Schuster, American Greetings, Time, Inc., and Volkswagen. His figurative paintings have been shown in solo shows in San Francisco, Austin, and Indianapolis. Rob lives in, I want to say this correctly, is it Zionsville, Indiana, with his wife
That's
Amber
it.
and their dogs? Is it Zionsville? Zionsville.
Zionsville. Yeah, you got it.
Zionsville.
Yeah.
Welcome, Rob. Thank you for being with us today. I apologize for the long one. I really thought it was important that everyone knew all of your bona fides and your history. Some people may only know a couple of you. Some people may know all of you, but we have NCS members watching as well as comic fans around the world. And this is going to be a really interesting chat, not only from the perspective of people who are interested in your work, but other cartoonists who are really interested in how to get, other cartoonists who might be working in similar fields, who might be interested in how to get into the fields that you are in. To that end, we put the call out to all of our wonderful NCS members for some questions for you all. So we will be delving into some questions from the NCS members, as well as some other pre-prepared questions that we've been working on for this panel. The very first question, and arguably the most important question for you all, is, are you even wearing pants right now?
No.
I'm wearing a dress, so no.
Okay, all right. And Mark, that's almost certainly a no from you.
Yeah, it's a skirt.
All right, that counts.
enough.
All right. Well, the first question, which I think is a great way to start, is from Greg Cravens, who says, you'll probably get this question from a lot of people, but he was first, so I'm going to ask it from him. What is your primary advice to anyone else who wants to move from comic strips to publishing books? Is there a single bit of overall advice or a particular critical starting point? And we'll start with you, Mark. Is there anything in particular that you've found that was a critical and very helpful piece of advice to transition from doing a comic strip to moving into the world of book publishing?
I would say that for me, the first step and the most critical step was finding a book that I liked, the format that I liked, and one that really spoke to me, that I could see myself doing something within that kind of format. Like, I guess the leader at the time was the Jeff Kinney books and the Diary of a Wimpy Kid. But then Lincoln Purse is also doing the Big Nate books, and they were starting to make noise at the time. It was 2012. And I really liked how Lincoln was doing his books. And so I kind of read those and picked up on that kind of format where he was actually doing illustrations and text that were kind of infused together. In other words, it wasn't an illustrated, it wasn't illustrations of text. The text and illustrations were all fused together, so one couldn't exist without the other. So I kind of like that format, and that's kind of like what I went with. But I would say, most importantly, first, to find something that you really like, and find your own voice within that format.
That's interesting. Yeah. And Maria, did you have anything in particular that you've learned now from transitioning from panels and greeting cards as well, and doing illustration work and cartoon work for Mad and for different magazines, and now you're in book publishing? Is there anything that you've found that's been particularly instructive?
Yeah, for me, it was reading a lot of books about story structure and writing. And one of the ones that was the most helpful for me was Sid Field's book on screenplays. Even though it's screenplays, it distilled story structure so clearly for me. And then also for me, it was, and I went through 3 different agents to land on the agent I have now, but I think finding an agent was extremely helpful in the process itself completely. And I love my agent to death, but it took 3 tries.
It took 3 tries. All right. Well, yeah. I want to explore that aspect of things, finding an agent, in a bit. But first, Terry, is there anything that you've found a really solid piece of advice in transitioning from strips, a strip which you retired this year, and then moving into the book world?
Yeah. Well, first of all, on the pants thing, I'm going to plead the 5th on that one. But yeah, the other question. Honestly, I mean, the way I got into it, I just wanted to see if I could do it. So I just kind of wrote very organically. I had no script, no outline. I just wanted to write and see where it took me and to try and surprise myself. And from there, that's when the format kind of came along. I wrote it more as, I guess, a novel, an illustrated novel to begin with. And then my agent actually came up with the idea of doing both a graphic novel and illustrated novel hybrid, because the book ended up being told from the standpoint of two different girls. So that just kind of took me into a whole new world and, and experimentation. But honestly, I think the fun part is just trying it, just seeing what you come up with.
That's interesting. Rob, is there anything you've found particularly instructive going from Adam at Home and your previous strips into the now several books that you've published?
Well, going on what Mark said, I think finding your inspiration is really important. I've been reading these collections called the Flight Anthologies. They're a series of, sort of short graphic stories, and I was just in love with what people were doing in there, and so I wanted to try it. So the first thing I did was like a 7-page story, and then that 7-page story ended up turning into Monster on the Hill, a graphic novel. So and this kind of ties into what Terry said. I think honestly the most important thing for me, or my suggestion, would be just do it, just start, because it's easy to sit and think about it forever and wonder, could I do this? Can I do this? Can I, do I have the skill to do it? Do I have the time to do it? And probably the most important thing to do is just dive in. And then, what happened with me is I think I kind of surprised myself, and that was pretty exciting. And then I wanted to show it to people, and I did, and it led to good things.
Interestingly, first of all, I'd love for you to let us know where we can find the Flight Anthologies that you're reading. Where can we find those if we wanted to look them up online?
You can look them up on Amazon.
So they're in print as well?
Yeah, they're in print. And I've got one right here. I could show you.
Oh, great. Yeah, just in case anyone's interested in finding them for themselves. So they're in print on Amazon and presumably in ebook format as well?
Yeah, they're just these
great.
Gorgeous collections of different,
wow.
Okay, Mark, help me with his name. Kazu Kibuishi. Did I say that right? He does some stuff in there, and I mean, I just got so inspired by the different art styles and the different storytelling styles that it made me want to. It really made me want to try to tell something like a graphic novel. And
right, yeah. Do you find that format?
It's Kazu Kabushi.
Kazu, right.
Yeah.
It looks like some beautiful artwork in there. It's just incredible. So that was the 6th volume that you were showing?
Yeah, and I think there were 7 volumes total.
Wow.
And yeah, and he, Kazu, he put the whole thing together. I think he was the.
Is that Flight? Is that Flight? The book Flight? Yes.
Yeah, and they're gorgeous. Every one of them is just so inspirational. I get almost like a high reading them, just like, oh my God, I want to try some of this stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
That's really cool. It's interesting that Monster on the Hill just developed from a short story, an idea. A lot of the advice sometimes, it's kind of flies in the face of the Sid Field screenplay philosophy of having like a beat sheet and having, preordained character development and story development and having an idea. The fact that you start from the inside out, it sounded like that's what you kind of did. You just started with a short story and then grew that from one seedling of an idea into this entire forest of what became a brilliant publication.
Well, in fact, I got approached by someone who was doing an anthology. So I was kind of doing what these things are in Flight, where it's a shorter story. And so I just put it together for this anthology, and then it fell through. And then I had this 7-page story, so I started showing it around, and Top Shelf really liked it. But, yeah.
This is a specific question for you because actually both you and Mark can speak to this, but in 2021 is the release. Did I get that right? You've got a release in 2021?
Yeah.
Can you speak to sort of your process of just transitioning from not only from strips to the book, but now the book into a completely different format? I know, Mark, you have a background in film and in television, but what was your process in doing that and jumping from that format?
Okay. It was Well, I'll just be perfectly honest. It was sort of a train wreck. They bought my book, which they loved, and then figuratively they just ran as far from my book as they could, and just kept changing things along the way. And each iteration of the script was further and further away from my book, to where I don't know that it's even recognizable as having come from my book at this point. I'm working on a couple of other projects, and we're really trying to hold the reins. So, but once they had bought, and Paramount got involved, once they got involved, it was, you can get sort of tossed aside is what can happen. I still think it's going to be a fun movie, and some of the characters have the names of my characters, but the plot and everything else has changed. So the projects that I'm working on now for the future, I think seem like they're going to be a lot more rewarding, as opposed to a nightmare. So yeah.
Well, that brings me to the next sort of question, very, very perfectly, is creative control. Creative control is obviously very important to every creator, in every medium, but particularly from conception of the idea through to the final publication. And with books, I don't think a lot of people realize how many steps books go through and how different it is for each author. Some authors, it's very few steps, and for other authors, there are several rounds of revisions and copy edits and edits to illustrations and cover illustration edits and character name changes, character background changes. What I'm fascinated with, particularly with you, Terry, if you wanted to speak to this one, from the very beginning, I mean, when you started out with the idea, how close to the finished product was the original idea that you had with Emmy?
Amazingly, it stayed pretty true to its original content. The only thing that kind of deviated was, as I said, the format, because I really envisioned it more as an illustrated novel, kind of in the vein of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but maybe with more illustrations. But then it kind of deviated. There you go. Yeah, you could see that's the graphic novel portion. That's from my newest book, Becoming Brianna, which is, if no one knows, it's actually kind of a niche thing. It's about a bat mitzvah. But it keeps it fresh for me. It's great because if I get tired of doing the illustrative part, which is a little more doodly, I can move on to the graphic novel portion, and that's a little tighter, and it takes a little bit longer, and it just keeps it a little more fun and challenging for me, I guess. So, but yeah, that's where it kind of went awry a little bit, but in a great way.
That's good. Maria, did you have a similar experience with your process?
Mine pretty much stayed true to the story. Interestingly, in the beginning, when I was working through the draft, there was one character that wasn't really, not necessarily a bad guy, wouldn't be the right way to say it, but they were kind of thinking she was more of a friend than a foe. And at first I was like, I don't know, but it was interesting because I kind of played with it. And as I did, it actually, what they suggested worked. And most of the time, like, I love my editors, they have incredible feedback, and I usually stick mostly to what my vision is, but that I end up completely loving this character. She took this weird turn and took on a life of her own, and I'm surprised by her all the time. I absolutely I feel like a lot of the time it's like watching a photograph develop in solution. You don't really know what's going to happen, and then all of a sudden it sort of wells up and you're like, oh, cool. And I've been learning, weirdly enough, I learned so much from my characters. So it's a really interesting process.
Well, speaking of that, I wonder if you could share the story behind the image. Yeah, do you mind explaining this?
No, not at all. So Not Enough was based on real experiences and real feelings from childhood. I based Natalie on my childhood self, but as I was saying earlier, she took on a life of her own, and I can't believe what I've learned from this character. She really just kind of started telling me what to say, but I took real events. So this was based on a costume I had from childhood, which I mean, some things you can't make up. And there's a scene where she gets plucked by the kid sitting behind her, and I also got plucked. So it was a funny thing, but I think, like, for me, because it was somewhat I'm calling it autobiofictionography, a word that Linda Berry made up, which I love. It's, based on truths and definitely true feelings, but then there's a lot of fiction around it, and all the supporting characters are sort of an amalgam of personalities. So her best friend isn't as one specific person. It's sort of an amalgam of friends and traits from one that created a new character.
So that in that sense, that it stayed very true to the original vision that you had. So it's something that's very unique to yourself.
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, that also speaks to something that Mark, I'll come back to you now, that you mentioned initially was finding your voice, sort of having a distinct voice. You really wanted to find something that, you know, you wanted to have the right format, you wanted to have the right voice, you wanted to have the right sort of creative vision. But then how did you find that? I know that's a really complicated question because it takes time, but.
Well, as far as creative control for in publishing, you generally have a very wide berth. They let you basically hang yourself. And you know, it's a sink or swim thing. It's only when you start dealing with Hollywood that they think they know better and they change everything. That's Hollywood. It's a completely different thing. But doing publishing, they pretty much let you go, and they'll just, you know, they'll try to steer you in the right direction when you have pacing issues or you know, characters that don't make any sense, or a idea thread that's leading in a wrong direction, and certainly the big one, which is spelling, especially for cartoons, which is why I generally do a wordless strip, because there's no issues with spelling. So that's a good thing. But I mean, I should also say that the hardest thing that I had was visualizing how to make a novel, because I was always looking at comic strips. I'm a very visual person, and comic strips are these little tiny pieces of ideas, and for every day, and it literally, each strip represents a day. So, you know, it's easy to visualize something in 3 or 4 panels. But when you think of a novel, it's, I don't know, how many chapters is it going to be? How many pages? How do I hit 250 pages? Which is, you know, the story is going to be as long or as short as it's going to be. How do I make sure it falls within that? And I started to think of each chapter as a comic strip, because when I tell a story in the comics, each strip is like a different day. So it seemed to me I could visualize it better if I thought of each chapter as a comic strip, because each comic strip has a beginning, a middle, and end. And usually a cliffhanger that leads you in to the next day. And that's how I started thinking of chapters. And so it was easier for me to just start just, you know, like everybody said here, I just sat down and just started writing. All I had, when I started a book, I really just want to have a really strong first scene, because I think that establishes your main character and it gets the reader involved. So I usually start, if you can get that first scene going that you're really happy with, it will usually lead to other things. And you may have an idea, like in my head, like I sold all my books based on 60 pages, and then I'd have to write the rest out in long form. And when I actually go and write the novel, they end up being completely different from what I originally sold, because you constantly want to surprise yourself, like Rob Harrell said, or it's just not worth doing. If I'm not surprising myself, I can't expect that my readers will be surprised.
Well, that actually brings me to a question from NCS member David Apatow. You all know David. He asks, are books a good way to escape the restrictions of a strip? For example, can they be used for more artistically ambitious work or more adult content, or does that alienate the audience for your strip? I want to start with you, Mark, and then work through Maria, Terry, and Rob. You have 2 strips, Mark. You had, until recently, you had Leo and Heart of the City. You have audiences for those, and presumably a lot of those audiences have followed you onto the page in publishing. Have you alienated any of those readers, do you think? Or
I really don't care. I will tell you right now that I write, and I think most writers will tell you this, that they write for themselves. That if they're not enjoying what they're doing, your readers can tell. So you have to be doing something that you enjoy. You have to be entertaining yourself, and then the hope is that you can bring people along. You know, I love the idea of trying something new. When it comes to, I mean, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to jump out of a plane because I want to see what it's like to parachute to the ground. That's not the kind of thing I want to challenge myself with. But I do find it really exciting to start a project when I really don't know what I'm doing, a creative project. because I just feel like I never stop learning, and it's always exciting to see, can I do this? And so every book is a challenge, and I that's why I've done picture books and graphic novels and illustrated novels, and now what I'm working on is kind of like a hybrid of a picture book / graphic novel. I don't know if you've ever seen the Hugo book. Has anybody seen that?
Hugo?
Hugo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Oh, it's an amazing graphic novel / picture book, I would say, and it's a combination of prose and artwork, but it's like 500 pages long.
Is it The
I'm not gonna
Invention
go
of
down.
Hugo Cabret?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
It's that right. The name of the movie is Hugo. The
Right,
book
right.
is, and I'm kind of doing something like that. It's like an area that I'm not used to at all, but I'm just really finding it exciting. I love to do something I don't know how to do.
I think that's a very interesting central tenet of all of your, I've noticed all of your careers, is you never really are content to just master one skill. You've all transcended your initial, what people initially discovered you for, and then you've found great relish in kind of cultivating the skill of being.
Well, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. If I was hugely successful as a comic strip artist, I wouldn't do any of this.
You're being very modest. That's funny. Now, actually, one thing, and I want to continue that thread about the restrictions of a strip that David was asking you about. I want to move to you, Maria, because you actually, Half Full is a really interesting case because it's a panel. And you're
Right.
effectively, a panel has even more restrictions than a strip. You have less room to move. I wanted to know two very distinct things from you, in fact. One is the point that Mark just made, which is you should really write for yourself, and then the people who like it will find you, and they'll know if you're enjoying yourself or not, and if you're being just doing it for them. But also your transition from doing a regular panel and greeting cards as well, and now writing for yourself. But also, do you feel more free in this new format?
They're so different that they're completely apples and oranges. And I agree what Mark said completely, that I write for myself and I can't think about the end. And I think that goes for all, even magazine stuff. People definitely know when you're not being authentic to yourself. So if it's something that makes me happy and something I enjoy doing, I absolutely agree that you feel that energy in the work. I love the difference between the two because in a panel, obviously everything has to happen all in one shot. It's one whole scene. The entire story is happening in one frame completely. And now I get to also experiment with characters in an ongoing arc, and it's completely different. So I actually love having the two things at the same time because it lets me kind of experiment with two different things. And also what Mark said about sort of jumping in, I love that too. Like, can I do this? Let's give it a shot. What's the worst that's going to happen? It's not going to work out. So I really love taking on new challenges as well.
I think that's a fantastic attitude for any creative, is to really sort of step outside of your comfort zone and see what else you can do. And like you said, it's what's the worst that can happen? All right, it doesn't work. Great.
So then you try something new. And also I've learned so much. I'm now on the third book, and each book I've learned so much about everything from process to efficiency to storytelling to characters. It's really interesting. It's like this incredible learning process, and I keep trying to refine that process. So even things that we talk about today, my book process, I know that's going to change by the time I finish this one and move on to the next one.
You all have these very unique voices, as I mentioned, and you all have these very well-rounded characters. Rob, you've explored, especially, your latest, I wonder if you would mind speaking about your latest book about Wink. About character development and bringing those characters to life. I mean, even your comic strip characters, Adam at Home, everyone had a very well-rounded character. And that ethos has seemed to sort of jump from your strips to the books. Probably even more resoundingly so.
Yeah, for me, I think that's the starting point, really, with anything, is figuring out the characters. I think a strong character voice can carry, I know there are a lot of people who start writing, like I have some friends who've written adult novels, and it seems like they've just researched a ton, and they start from like the place and all that, but I always just start from a voice. So yeah, Wink, Wink was the biggest challenge I've had as far as like jumping away from doing a comic strip. It's about a serious subject. It's about a kid with cancer, and so that was my jumping off the deep end moment. Was, can I write this book and still make it entertaining and funny, even though it's about a kid going through cancer? And it's my sort of I can't remember the word, but
autobiofictionography.
Yes, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because it was loosely based on what I went through as an adult, but I said it in middle school, and the way that I found to get through it was just by leaning on that character of Ross. And it was, at one point early on, it had a lot more jokes and cartoons and sort of step aside gags, I guess you'd call them. And it just felt forced. And so, I went through rewrite after rewrite, making sure that everything felt authentic. And I wanted it to feel, all the jokes to feel justified, or all the jokes to feel like they were grounded in reality.
Right.
And I will say this, as far as the difference between that, it's remarkable, the similarities between doing a strip or drawing or doing a book. Like the first draft is kind of your sketch, and then you refine it and refine it and refine it, and then you go to ink, and it's interesting to me that the creative process, whether it's painting a picture or writing a book, actually has so many similar feelings in it. Like, you realize when you're closing in on it, and you realize when you got it just the way you want it, and you have to step away and stop messing with it, that sort of thing.
That's interesting. I mean, I have to admit, it was a very bold move, and it really paid off. But to be writing about a character with cancer, who's also going through middle school, I think it was the New York Times who was saying, it's fun, but it's important. The word "important" really resonated in the feedback on your latest book, on Wink.
Yeah, that was the most rewarding thing about it. Is
really?
the reaction? Yeah, the reaction I've gotten from people has been, my Zarf books, I wanted them to have a little bit of message in there and that sort of thing, but I didn't want to beat anybody over the head with it. I really wanted it to be fun and funny and all that. And this one, I guess I delved a little bit more into trying to give loosely give some advice. I stay away from the word lessons, because I don't want it to.
Yeah, you don't want to be lecturous.
Yeah, I don't want it to be homework. So yeah, that's been really fun with this book, and so I'm hoping to do more.
Plus, it's got songs.
Yeah.
From all the reviews, people really enjoyed the songs.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah.
Well, Terry, you also had a similar. Like, I remember you saying that you just started writing and you wanted to challenge yourself and see where it went. And that seems like you and Rob both have that in common, that you just started writing and it just took its own, like, it started speaking to you. I mean, same with Maria's character, I guess, is it just started speaking to you and writing itself. There's two things that I'm really interested to know about your series. I mean, not only challenging yourself and getting out of your comfort zone in writing young male characters, but I mean, that creative process of those new premises and worlds and characters being of a different audience, I mean, than the Pajama Diaries. Do you think that there is a different audience between the Pajama Diaries and your series, your book series?
Oh yeah, with Pajama Diaries, I was actually writing specifically, well, in my own head anyway, to other parents, because it's a very parental type of strip. It's from the outlook of a mom, and all the juggling she does and her daily challenges and everything. So it was my way, it was my cry for help, and my way of trying to reach out and pull in an audience of parents. And with the books, I knew it had to, I mean, I kind of like Rob, I mean, you kind of want to, not specifically be so attuned to your audience, because then that'll kind of stifle the creativity. But I knew that I was writing for kids this time. So what I did was I knew I still needed to kind of be authentic, but still write toward a younger audience. So I just went back to how I felt when I was about that age, about 12, 13 years old. And I don't remember all the details of what happened then. I probably blocked a lot of it out, but intentionally. But I do remember all the feelings I had. I remember specifically how I felt all the time, because I was just some weirdly traumatized kid of my own making. So that's where quiet, artistic, imaginative Emmy came from. The challenge was trying to create all the characters that were in the next books, but I kind of did the same thing. I took aspects of my life, I took aspects of people I knew and kind of like blended them and into new people. And I kind of did that with the script as well. So in that sense, they were pretty similar.
So there was some sort of amalgams of different people in your strip that you kind of discovered that that's a really interesting way to create characters, is to take real world people and kind of take certain aspects of their personality and put them into one character.
Yeah, and then they kind of morph into their own people. They evolve as they go, and they can become different characters. I know with my kid characters in my strip, they became their own people completely. And even the parents, Jill and Rob, Jill's the main character, weirdly, they kind of reversed their roles. The character Jill became like so much more upfront and gregarious, and Rob kind of took a step back. In real life, if anyone knows Mike, my husband, they know it's completely opposite. So.
Yeah. I remember running into you both at the Billy Island Cartoon Library Museum in Ohio and going, wait a second, this whole thing is out of whack. I expected a totally different thing from your husband, who I thought I knew better than after I met him. I was like, yeah, I feel like I know you already. It's such an interesting thing to see what patchwork of different qualities you pulled from different people into the characters. Maria, we talked earlier about the fact that yours was very autobiography, but the fact that your characters, like, there's an interesting, I'd love to share just an image that you shared with us, the sort of book character of Nat, if you can see that. It's sort of, it's so interesting knowing you and then seeing that, and knowing, like, because you're already doing this second book, you're expanding this character now, and you're working on this. Third, yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Third. My God, I'm losing track.
Third and fourth are happening simultaneously, basically. So, yeah.
I don't know how you do this.
I don't either.
You have a clone hiding behind that column behind you. The reason I love this image is that Nat has all these different reactions to these different personas. She seems to love the top left and bottom right, be most comfortable in the top left and bottom right. Did you want to speak to that when you're uniquely, as Alex asks, creating premises and worlds and characters for the panel? How do you decide what audiences you're attracting now with Nat versus your panel or your greeting cards?
Other than I know that it's, the target space, basically ages 8 to 12. Again, I don't really think about it. And it's funny, this particular scene, Natalie had, the premise of Nat Enough is she gets dumped by her best friend on the first day of school and she's trying to win her back. So she's kind of literally trying on a bunch of different hats she decides that if she gets a really cool hat, maybe she'll be cool. And she's kind of going through these all different personas of herself. And in the book resolves with her realizing what she needs to be is more of who she is and focus on her strengths and her talents, just as she is, and not worry about anybody else. And I don't really think at all about the end result. And I think it's funny when people, that whole, like, where do you get your ideas question that everybody loves? And my answer is, I don't know. But I do know, I feel like I'm sort of like a Sherpa. This stuff comes in and I just need to put it down on the page. And I feel like I don't even have a responsibility for it. It's kind of like wrangling all this stuff into one place and making a story out of it. And that's where the editors come in, where they find the holes and the bits and the pieces. But I don't really think at all about that. I kind of get into the world, into the story, and let the characters reveal themselves to me and let them tell me. And the world, I think, for me, came very organically as well. I mean, because it was loosely based on my childhood, I sort of had kind of vague ideas, but then I sort of knew that I basically knew it was set in middle school, but then the other pieces sort of evolved on their own. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really answer the question, I don't think, but the question, the answer is I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just shows up and I write it.
I don't know is a very valid answer, by the way. I
Yeah,
can tell all of you,
answer.
there's no, there's no expectation that you have the answer to everything.
Yeah.
Some of these things just happen organically and you don't know how they happen, which is the beauty of the creative process. And Maria and Terry and Rob, I find that a lot of yourselves come through in your characters, whether you notice it or not, whether you're trying to or not. I don't think you ever really have complete control over that, but you have these intrinsic parts of your personality that end up coming through in your characters. And the memory is an interesting thing, and it remembers certain things according to feelings. And Terry, you were talking earlier about the fact that you didn't remember specific events, but you remembered feelings. You remembered how you felt, not specifically what it was. And you're creating characters based on emotions. I mean, these are characters at a time when things are really uncertain. You're learning about things. You're learning about the world. You're learning about unpleasant things and pleasant things at the same time, and this whole spectrum of emotions. I want to ask you particularly because your books address certain different elements, and even to the really esoteric, like as you mentioned with the bat mitzvah. Bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah, I should say.
Bar for boy, bat for girl.
But I have to say that the way that you have different characters that address different things in those times of life. Are you drawing from your own childhood, or are you really doing research on in 2020, or in at least the sort of 21st century, what that experience is versus, say, Mark's experience in 1977? Like Short and Skinny was such an interesting, almost like a snapshot of a life of a childhood that a lot of people could relate to if they grew up in that era. How much I guess research are you doing on characters who are growing up in the era of social media and smartphones and all that sort of stuff?
Well, I'm lucky because I have 2 daughters who have been growing up in the age of social media. So I have a lot to draw on there. With my latest book, they both went through bat mitzvahs. I'm going to quiz you later. And as have I, and my husband went through a bar mitzvah, and so we all we all remember the trauma from that, as well as the fun times. So yeah, I think with my characters, it's kind of a mix of me remembering myself back then, because honestly, nothing has really changed much except for social media. That's really the only big thing I could think of, because the feelings are still there, the situations are still there. Things might be more magnified now because of social media. The bullying's a little bit different too in that sense. It's probably twofold now because it's in person and online. And my book, Just Jamie, actually dealt with that quite a bit. My own daughter, my older one, she was the basis of Just Jamie, kind of in a loose way, but she was basically dumped by her friend group over a group text message.
Oh, wow.
In 8th grade. And it was horrible. It was actually right before spring break too. We had to travel 20 hours by car to Florida, and my daughter just got dumped by all her friends. So she was a total trooper, I have to say. But anyway, everything's fine now. She has great friends now. She's in college, so all is well. But everyone in our family remembers what she went through, and it was so universal. So just taking, those feelings from her, from myself, because I was a shy kid. I was frequently excluded, whether intentionally or not. So it's just all there. And by the way, going back to that one piece about, like Mark was talking about things that you really can't use as topics. I actually had thought about that because I think it was just yesterday, I got a message from a preteen girl who's read my books and said, "Can you do one about getting your period?" And I'm like, "Oh."
Okay.
Want to? But
I think you can do that.
There's a whole
can
book.
do that.
Flow. Isn't
I
there
mean,
a
it's
book
a
Go with
lived
the Flow?
experience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, other authors have, but I'm not sure if it's really been covered in a graphic novel. And now I want to
Go with
have
the
that
Flow.
challenge. So
Yeah.
no one take that. This is
Okay.
mine.
No, it's there. Go with the Flow. There's a book called Go with the
I
Flow, which
won't
is about
touch it.
getting your period.
Yes, right.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, it really is. Yeah.
Go with the flow. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
Maria, do you mind expounding on?
Sorry.
I honestly haven't seen that. It's not in my. I guess the algorithm hasn't served it to me. What is that? What?
I don't know much about it. I
Novel?
just know the title and that it's a graphic novel, and I'm almost positive that's the premise. So I might be wrong, but I'm almost positive
Nice.
it's there. So it does exist.
Huh,
Yeah.
All right.
I should
I'll check it out
research
when I'm
more
still
before I
reading.
talk. Yeah, might be talking out of school, so I'm looking now to make sure. But
While you're looking at that, I want to jump to Rob.
I'm pretty sure it
because I
does.
do Rob, I mean, did you draw from your, did you diarize as a kid? What was your, do you remember, do you have specific and very vivid memories of your childhood? You've written these characters that are so well-rounded, but I wonder how many of those derive from real-world kind of memories of yours.
I definitely have really vivid memories from middle school. I don't know why. It just seems like a vivid time. Mark touched on it a little bit, but I think so much happens during that time period. He said bridging that fantasy and real life. I also think you're kind of finding out who you are during that time period. It's like you're letting go of your parents', what is it, apron strings? What's the term? But you're also like slowly becoming your own person, or starting to become your own person. I remember I had my first friend in middle school that my parents weren't sure about, and it was awesome. It was like magical. Like, oh my God, they don't like this guy. He must be fun. I made movies, and I tried to write a book when I was in middle school with a friend, and we did all this stuff. So I had an amazing time in middle school, but it also had its really rough points. So I didn't write a diary. I wasn't one of those guys, Mark. But
I had no idea
so
why I
just
did
kind
that. I really don't know why I did that. I really don't. I mean,
Well, like you
it's
said,
so
Mark,
mundane.
you're very bored.
Yeah, no, it's so mundane. It's just like, today my uncle came and visited and he threw up, there's literally stuff like that in there.
That's a story.
my
I
internet is
have
failing
one
me.
too.
Oh,
you
really?
did too?
Hang on. Maria, do you have a diary? Did you keep a diary?
Not Garfield.
Oh,
I pulled a
shout
lot
out
of
to
stories,
Jim
but not
Davis.
enough from here. But
Impressive.
I was a massive Garfield fan as a kid, and here's the proof. But yeah, I wish I had written more of it. I mean, here, like, it's all like
Oh,
friendly
wow.
sky, yeah.
Well,
so-
let's cross promote the next session, which is with Jim Davis on Garfield.
Oh, all right.
But,
I've
yeah,
sent this
well-
to him. He knows about this.
yeah, Jim out in Muncie, Indiana. He's. What's funny about every creative person I know, particularly cartoonists, is if they didn't keep a physical diary, they did manage to somehow keep in their mind. They kept some kind of record of their childhood, whether it was traumatic or fun. Like Rob, whether you had fun or whether you were bullied, you remember it. You have a distinct memory of it. And I think if you're writing younger characters, you're drawing on those experiences, right? And some of the most interesting stuff I find, is when you have these characters that are almost an avatar for yourself, which are almost like, boy, I wish I had this bravery when I was 10. Mark, you've written these characters, like Leo is this incredible character that no one can place. It's like, well, you can't even compare him to anyone really. But then, how did you go from Leo to creating the characters that you have in your? I mean, I'm specifically asking about Desmond. I mean, that's a very specific and it seems as a reader very purposeful construction of a character. And this is I promise this is the last we're going into character, because I honestly feel like character is the central tenet of all of these stories. Because without these well-rounded characters, the stories fall apart. But how are you arriving at these characters? Is there any like how much editorial influence, Are there syndicates involved? You know, you mentioned, you know, because Andrew McMill Publishing are involved with some of your stuff. I know that you've all dealt with various publishers and syndicates, and you have people reading your stuff and giving feedback, and you all have this distinct voice as well. So, you know, how are you going about drawing on these characters? So going from Leo to Desmond, I mean, how are you getting there?
Well, Leo is my childhood. Everything that Leo embraces, I was afraid of. And Leo, I mean, I literally would try to build a robot, and I don't know how it thought it would come to life, but you know, I mean, I really imagined that it would. You know, if I just put these parts together, you know, maybe it'll just come to life. Maybe it'll, you know, it'll be one of those. I lived in such a fantasy world when I was a child that I really believed that if I stuck, you know, paper towel into a box and empty paper towel tubes and toilet paper tubes into a box, that it would become a robot that I could then command and do my bidding. And in Leo's world, that really happened. So that was, I guess, my way of addressing that. He's not afraid of nuclear war. He embraces it. Monsters of any kind. The darkness is his friend. And he actually finds his whole thing is weird things need love too, and that was kind of like the basis of that strip. The outcasts and the unattractive are the things that he loves.
I feel like that's why you love that Hugo Cabret graphic novel as well.
Yes, I do. I'm not going to say that book doesn't have problems, but I love the illustrations in it so much.
It's its own world.
Yeah, and Desmond Puckett is really more of a reality based, even though it's kind of reality based in the way that the Little Rascals were reality based. Like the Little Rascals could always get away with stuff, you know, like they would build a car and put the fireworks on the wheels, and it would really spin really fast, and they could, you know, win the soapbox derby race. In reality, they couldn't do that, but it's kind of stuck in reality, right? So I saw Desmond Puckett as more of that character. A kind of character, and he's interested in the same thing I was interested in, like haunted houses. I was terribly afraid of haunted houses, but I was fascinated by the effects and how they did them, and movie effects and monster makeup. I did all that stuff when I was a kid, you know. And my heroes were, you know, Tom Savini and Rick Baker. You know, these master, you know, Dick Smith, who did the makeup in The Exorcist, you know, so I put all those things into the character of Desmond Puckett. You know, all those characters live in me somewhere, and even the girl characters, you know, I always wanted strong female characters that didn't rely on the male characters, that they actually took the lead, and because those were always.
Look at your family. You have these incredibly strong female surrounding you at all times of day. You have a lot to draw.
That's because I raised them that way.
Yes.
You don't take any shit from those damn boys. Are you kidding me? You don't need a boyfriend. Be strong. I tell them, don't you understand the whole purpose of the Titanic movie? Jack died so Rose could live her life that she was supposed to live, a strong-willed woman. She became a pilot. She was riding horses. You know, by the end, we discovered she had this whole great life. She didn't need a man to define who she was.
Right.
So, I mean,
it's a great ethos to carry through to the kids.
One of the books that I really loved, I know it's not popular these days to say so, but I loved Gone with the Wind so much because the two central characters in that, Melanie Wilkes and Scarlett O'Hara, were extremely strong women, and how the men around them basically were looking for direction from them. You know, that's what, and so I always was attracted to strong female characters in that sense. I would really love to write a female character, but my agent says, no, you can't do that.
Why?
Yeah.
Oh, because it isn't your lived experience.
It's not a good idea. Not a good idea.
Rob, I want to jump to you for a second because I understand we discussed that the creative control kind of slips through your fingers in different iterations of your creative works, but when you're writing characters, are there any that you are writing that, you know, obviously you can't possibly write every character per your lived experience. I mean, you have to create a diverse set of characters. I'm going to jump to you, Terry, in a second on this. But Rob, I wonder, you know, how much consideration is there on this? And I also, just as a secondary question that I want you to jump onto, and I can reiterate this in a sec, but as Mark mentioned, he had some really distinct influences and inspirations. Was there anyone who inspired you particularly, or is there any model that you're kind of replicating as far as their philosophy creatively?
Okay, so let me start with characters. And my internet's doing weird things, so I think I caught most of that question.
You're clear, you're good.
Okay. You know, as far as the characters, I didn't really base them that much on real people. I know maybe that's not a popular answer, but I just sort of, I came up with them. I have sort of a bully in Wink, who ends up having a little bit more to him. And there was a guy in middle school who he was loosely based on, but I sort of took the shell of what he looks like and what I thought of him at that age, and then started working from there. And there are elements of my friends that pop up here and there. You know, Mark was talking about how he had the character who was smoking, and he ended up with it. I had this character in real life. He dipped like chewing tobacco, and I tried to get that in the book, and they just would not touch that. So in the book, he has a chewing gum problem where he spits into a jar because he chews his head. It was just ridiculous. But I actually kind of like it because it turned out to be this creepy, weird, like, who is this kid that chews these huge wads of gum and spits into a jar all the time? So in that way, you know, work and being pushed into a corner, like, no, you can't have him doing this awful thing that this kid did in real life, makes you be a little bit more creative and think, okay, he's got a gum problem. Then what was the second part of the question?
Sorry, I know it was a double-barrel question. The second part was, there anyone who inspired you? Is there any model that you're kind of replicating, or anyone who, in particular, who really, you know, you turn to when you're thinking, wow, boy, I really love to, you know, emulate that kind of creativity? Is there a Maurice Sendak or a Ronald Searle or any storytelling or art-wise?
It's sort of changed over the years. I mean, when I was younger, you know, apparently I told my parents in like 5th grade that I wanted to be Gary Trudell, which is weird for a 5th grader to say, but they stand by that story that I said that. And then, you know, I got really into like Bloom County, and Burke Breathitt, you know, was a huge influence. But then I also loved the John Belair's books. He wrote House with the Clock in Its Walls, and had a whole series of books that were just creepy enough for me, and didn't, you know, I didn't lose sleep over them, but they were spooky and creepy and fun. And so I go back all the time to those books because they just, there was something about the world that they captured that just really inspired me, I think, creatively, and made me want to write as well. So, and then, you know, as far as artwork, like I have tons of Pogo books around here. Walt Kelly has just been one of my, you know, I always just kind of drool over his drawings. And, you know, I think I've eventually found my own style. And do I think I look anything like Walt Kelly stuff? No. But, you know, just the love that went into those drawings and stuff was really
you can tell from your illustrative style how much you sort of drew from Walt and then kind of turned it into your own. You went off on your own sort of tangent, looking at like old Pogo strips. Yeah, it's very distinct, particularly in Monster on the Hill. Yeah,
and that's been, you know, somebody asked about can you branch out in doing books? I mean, absolutely. You know, I'm used to writing stories that are 4 panels and a punchline. And you know, if you want to tell a week-long story, you've got 6 installments, or, you know, Sunday as well, if you include it. But you know, that was part of what was so much fun about branching out with that first graphic novel. And then each time I write a book, I think I find that I like the writing as much or more than the art So I've gone through sort of a weird transition of realizing that I always thought I was an artist who kind of liked to write, and I think I kind of think of myself the other way now. I'm starting to slowly realize that I really like the writing part.
You're a writer who likes to draw now.
I guess so. Was that
Terry, I want to pick up the thread. Yeah, no, that's actually how I see all of you. I see of you as writers who have the ability to draw. Honestly, you have this adept. You've cultivated the skill of being able to write these incredibly well-rounded characters, but then also draw them. Most people have just one or two, like just the one. You either are a great writer or you're a great artist. But the reason that you're all here, all four of you, is that you all happen to have both of those skills at various levels. I mean, you some of you have done half a dozen books. Some of you are on your third, but you all have that skill, and it's incredible to watch the development, because people who have watched your strips develop. I just want to. I don't want to lose the thread that Rob just started. So I'm going to ask you, Terry, specifically. There was a within the series of your books, and again, you have addressed so many different topics in your books. I mean, between I think between Invisible Emmy, Positively Izzy, Just Jamie, and Becoming Brianna, and now Uniquely You, with the gang. What I find interesting is they're characters of different backgrounds. They're characters of different cultural backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, racial backgrounds. I said cultural, I should mean ethnic backgrounds. Are you getting any feedback from your editors or from your publishers on what you can and cannot do as an author in 2020? You managed to create these incredible characters from different backgrounds. What kind of editorial feedback were you getting in from conception through to finished product on these?
Sure. Nothing was quite, was really, everything was pretty much in my wheelhouse until Jamie. She is an African-American girl, and she was a background character in the first two books, and I thought it'd be fun to bring her into the spotlight in the third book, as well as her best friend Maya. They were called the Gossip Girls, and I wanted to sort of bring out their personalities, round them out a bit, just to show that they weren't just two-dimensional gossip girls. So with Jamie, I didn't really bring up a lot of cultural references or anything. I just made her the victim of the situation where she's excluded from her friend group. But just in case, we had, I think they're called sensitivity readers, who will come and check to make sure that you're not doing anything wrong. And there were definitely some instances that I wasn't even aware of that they wanted to change. Nothing major, but that was kind of it. As far as Becoming Brianna, which is the one that just came out, luckily I'm Jewish, so I have that going for me. So I was my own, sensitivity reader there. And I also had, my rabbi help a lot with this.
That's great.
Well. So, I think you do kind of have to be aware, and, oftentimes we'll do things that we're just, that we're not even aware of unless we've lived it. So, yeah, but otherwise, it hasn't really come up. I do think it's important to represent in books.
Of course. Yeah.
Diversity is a great thing.
I mean, Maria, your books also delve into, I mean, it's such an interesting thing to watch all of you sort of deal with these. I don't want to call them guide rails. I didn't know that there was such a thing as a sensitivity editor until I got into this process.
Yeah.
Was there any pushback with you on any of your character development or any of your stories?
Not really character development, just minor stuff. Pretty much what Terry was saying, like little stuff, and it was stuff that could have been not directly offensive, but could have been misconstrued. Kind of what you're describing in a way that, if under the right situation, it could be misconstrued. And if that's the case, don't even go there. So if there's a chance that something's going to be potentially offensive and it's not an integral part of the story, which none of the minor things were, I don't,
Yeah.
yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I
Okay.
don't, I'm fine to let things go. There was some naming conventions that people thought, oh, you know what, that might potentially. So then, and it turned out about 100% of the time when I have to come up with something else, I end up liking the alternative better anyway.
great.
So,
So it's a
yeah,
win.
it's been, yeah, so far. It hasn't been anything major that I thought was going to change the story or the character or anything. So
Well,
I
that's
haven't had to
good.
worry
That's
about too
positive.
much.
Mark,
Yeah.
have you had any experiences that over the course of doing all of the different kinds of books that you've had in different publishers? I know you've worked with a lot of different publishers.
Yes. And you know, the funny thing is now is Kirkus, who does reviews for books, will actually go in and break apart your book and say how many black characters, how many white characters, which to me is just fucking insulting. I mean, like that has any bearing on anything. It really shouldn't. You know, how diverse your characters are, or whether they feel like placeholders for just so you can have a diverse cast. They shouldn't be even calling that out, in my opinion. And they only do it on middle grade books. Only on middle grade books. I have no
They
idea
don't
what
do
it
it
is.
on any other kind of books?
No,
Not that I've seen.
no. It's so weird. And yeah, the two books that I'm writing now have zero have zero human characters. I'm just gonna
I'm
have
asking,
to, I don't
this
know
is
what
a,
the next 10 years is going to hold for what you know, middle-aged white guys can do. But
Right.
and I'm not complaining. I'm just saying this is what the market is. This is the reality of the market. I'm not complaining. I think there's so many great female stories out there. I think there's so many great people of color stories out there that just haven't been told.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, Maria, they're just getting around now to talking honestly about menstrual cycles. Why did it take so long?
Yeah, and that book is,
And
I
it's a
looked
big
it up.
thing.
It is. It go with the
It
flow.
is?
And I knew it got on my radar because I have a character named Flo, and I wanted to do a book go with the FLO flow. And I was
Right.
looking around to see if that title exists, and that's how it got on my radar. But you're right. I mean, that's been a stigma for so long. Like finally,
Right.
2020, we can say that word openly, and people don't freak out.
Which is
I mean,
ridiculous. Yeah.
yeah, agreed. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
I find that so interesting, and Mark, it's such a shame because, you know, as you mentioned, you know, you can have the inspiration and you can have all these people around you that you can draw from. Obviously, you don't have their lived experience because it's impossible to live 44 lifetimes in one. I think there's a sweet spot between, and I may be playing devil's advocate here, so I don't want to get too far into it because we are running tight on time, but there must be a sweet spot between only writing about your lived experience and having the sensitivity to write about someone else's lived experience with the right research, character references, sensitivity editors, and the ability to kind of make sure that the writing, there's nothing less interesting about the character than the color of their skin.
Everything you're saying makes
preference.
complete sense. There are so many things that I would like to say that I know you can't. Just because it's just a different time right now, and I get it. I'm totally aware that it's an accurate way of feeling. You know, but I have to work within that. And so what I'm doing is, like I said, I'm doing all like fantastical characters right now. I mean, one book is a complete fantasy. I'm world building from scratch. The other one is, you know, it's our world, but it's strictly from the point of view of animals. And I know I'm not going to get in any trouble there. Nobody's going to tell me, you don't know what it's like to be a cat. You know, I mean,
Maria, do you mind introducing our sixth panel member for the final question?
Oh yeah. So this is Toby. He has some things he wants to say.
Toby is a miniature dachshund.
Yes, he is, and he's in the book. He's in my book.
Yeah.
He's the character Treat in my book because he won't come when I call him Toby. He comes when I call him. So when I yell Treat, so my neighbors think I'm nuts because I'm outside yelling Treat, and then he comes running back in. So.
Okay, so the very, very last question, and I promise you, it's not where do you get your ideas. The final question is one probably more technical, and I feel like people who have been watching this whole thing have kind of probably been waiting for this part the whole time, just purely from a technical level, and that's why I asked if you were wearing pants first. Is the process, the actual physical guts, nuts and bolts process of creating a book, whether you do the roughs or the writing, you know, sitting around in the garden, or if you write it with a friend, if you bounce it, if you record it into a phone, if you sketch it into a sketchbook, if you doodle it, if you sit at a drawing board and bang your head against the screen, hoping like hell that characters fall out. The very last question, which I promise is the very last question, I could talk to you all forever on this, is the actual process of creating your book, because all of the artwork, and I say this honestly, all of the artwork in all of your books, Mark, Maria, Terry, and Rob, are brilliant, and they're all so unique and so different and so you. They look like your voice sounds, which I have to admit is a huge luxury for any artist, for their art to look like their voice sounds. It takes so long to figure that out, and I think all of you have nailed it. And I know that it's an ongoing developmental process, but it's a joy to watch, it's a joy to read. And before you get to the end of one of your books and you go, oh my God, I need more. I want it. What's the next one? When's the next one coming? It's a very Moorish aspect to creating. So what I'd like to ask all of you, and I'm going to start with Mark, go to Maria, Terry, and then Rob. And this is our last question. And thank you to all the NCS members who submitted questions. These have been fantastic. Hopefully we've covered pretty much all of them, actually. How does your process look? And I really want you to go nuts and bolts on this. If you've got stuff hanging around in the studio, if you've got something to show, by all means, show it. But Mark, I'd like to know, what's your actual process of writing and drawing and creating these books?
Generally, I will start with a loose idea and start to illustrate the characters out, and and then the characters start to take shape. And when I do a graphic novel, there are so many steps to a graphic novel, but when I actually write it out long form, it starts out like, I'll just show you some pages. This is one I'm working on now.
Great.
And it starts out looking something like this.
Wow.
With a loose idea of what the characters are, and and I actually want to know how the text is going to fall out. Mm-hmm. And this is where the writing and the layout starts to happen, and I'll have multiple ideas on the same page. So this is the text, and here's the layout for how the way I see the page going. But this is all subject to change as I go. So this will then, once I finish this, and this is the first time I'm actually going to write the books completely out, then I'm going to go back and redo the whole thing in a more a tighter version, and that's what I'll actually use to pitch the concept to a publisher.
Can I ask why you changed the process?
Usually it starts out with just like a thumbnail, just like that, just like that's it. And hopefully, if I'm not inspired and if it doesn't lead anywhere, then I'll you have to be willing to just throw something away and start over.
Yeah. I remember reading that Richard Thompson's recycle bin was overflowing with images that otherwise would be deemed as ready to frame.
Right. Yeah.
And then you have to be willing to throw stuff out if it just doesn't fit what you're doing.
Well, you'll never know what we're unsatisfied with. Once my books are published, I never open them again.
Oh, good! Wow.
I don't ever want, because I will not find nothing but mistakes, and it will just ruin my entire day. So I just don't. Yeah. Once it's done, I'm on to the next thing.
I think every artist
that's
would.
A failure. Now I look on to the next thing. It's always moving forward. Always moving forward.
I think every artist would empathize with that very philosophy. You never want to look at your finished work, because all you will see is mistakes. From Jack Davis to Mort Drucker, it's
right.
Everyone just sees their mistakes.
Yeah, I think everybody here will agree with that.
Maria, I remember having a conversation with you about your process, because you and I talk technical stuff from nibs to inks to wash to drying to color consistency scans. Everything.
One of my favorite topics.
It is my one and only favorite topic. I'm a one-note musician.
Yeah.
I only ever talk about process because I'm intensely fascinated with it. You in particular, because you're one of my heroes of process. Would you mind taking us through your process a little bit?
Yeah, I have. So from beginning to end, and it's funny because like I said earlier, it's been evolving. So I don't know I was saying, I don't know if you're able to see my bulletin board. Can
Wow.
you see that?
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
so I'm in the middle of a rewrite on book 3, and I haven't done this before, but I wanted to see it big. And there's a lot of subplots and things going on that I was sort of weaving together. So for the first time I did, and these are just sticky notes, and I'm a huge, you wouldn't believe how many I have garbage bags.
I believe it. I believe it.
So anyway, that was but typically I start with an outline, and my outline is really just a roadmap, and by the end, it ends up looking nothing like the outline. It's almost like I kind of plug in the key points, like here's the beginning, middle, end, turning point, inciting it, and even that stuff ends up getting lost. But one thing I don't know where this idea even came from, but I like to take notebooks, and I want to see it as a book. So I fill it up, and I remember I got one of these, and it was at my first book. I got it, and I was like, okay, I filled it up with the pages. Like, I just have to fill this up. So my roughs, as you can see, are super, super rough. I mean, and
I love seeing the roughs.
Draft, I bet like half of this isn't even in the final. So I go through, but even after the next iteration, so I ended up writing the whole book basically by hand and pencil and then typing it in. This current book, I've been writing stuff loosely and then typing in Photoshop, and I keep a whole document in InDesign because I want to see the flow of the book. So at every stage, I'll print it out and put it in a notebook because I want to be able to flip. And then I have a hard time reading stuff on the screen to make edits. So even when they send me edits, I print them all out. And then I go through this book with sticky notes and say, I need to edit this here and edit that there, whatever. So I did my book. The first 2 were in watercolor. So then I had these notebooks that I kind of kept every page of pages from the book in here. So here, this is from book 2. And then I do all the text. I'm not a good letterer, so I do all the text. I have a font from my
I have to ask you about the font. Did you make a font, or like how did you do that? I have to ask.
Well, it's the same one I've used for my comic. I've had it for years. But because I wanted to sort of keep that same voice and feel. I thought about hand lettering for a little while there and realized I'm not good. And the edits, the edits are extensive, so it just works. And I know people do beautiful hand lettering and they're incredible, but it's not. I kind of like for me, it works better to have it. So it works in layers. Obviously the watercolors on one layer, the frames are digital on another layer, and the text is on another layer. And this next book, I think I might go digital watercolor for this one.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm sort of, if I can get the look the way I want it, the sort of loose softness to it, because that's one thing I really loved about working in watercolor. Kind of like the paint took on a life of its own in places, and I loved how it kind of helped change mood and the way the paint kind of that was a lot of fun. And I did all the cleanup digitally, so I would go in, and that was hours of manipulating the watercolor, using the clone tool to fix things. And so,
do you get color consistency by inking all the reds at the same time and all the blues at the same time? You have very, very distinct color theory in your work.
No, you know what I did have, and I was looking for a photograph. I had 15 of those, masonite boards running at a time, because it was more about my deadlines are really crazy tight, as everybody's are. So it was more about efficiency. It wasn't about color control, but I would do a section, and I also got really good with the hairdryer. And I learned something else about a hairdryer. I nominated myself for a Darwin Award. So the back of the hairdryer, if you have long hair, will get sucked into the back of the hairdryer. I found out.
God.
So don't do that. Anyway, so I would line up the masonite board. So I would let one section dry and then go to another section and then kind of like move through. But I had sort of color charts for the characters, so I knew what paints to use. But it wasn't about consistent. I stayed with I stayed with a consistent palette as far as like certain reds and certain browns and that kind of thing.
That really jumped out at me when I saw your work, was that it was very consistent and there was a very deliberate color choice. I feel like you have a palette that is very, and in fact, it kind of matches your panels as well. I feel like over time, you have a certain palette that fits the Maria kind of voice, as it were.
You should see the walls of my house.
I know. It's obvious. I mean, you have very.
My car's orange. I know. I can't help myself. I don't know. Yeah. I love color, though. I love color. And that's why, I know a lot of people work with colorists, both for both for comics. I don't know if I could ever get to the point where I could let go of that, because I love that part. I love all parts of the process, so I don't know.
Of course. We'll see. I think, as a general rule, as a cartoonist, illustrator, writer, whatever you're doing creatively, I think fall in love with the process, right? Because you get the finished product and then you get this nice little, yeah, sure, you get this little dopamine drip, or you get this little buzz. You're like, oh, wow, great, I'm on a book tour, or I'm on a, you know, I finished it, I turned in the book. And then you have your glass of champagne and then you're like, ah, all right, the next book, here we go. You know,
you know what, for me, though,
enjoy the process, right?
The process, because you're sitting down, it's a long thing. It's a marathon, you know, it's an Ironman. You're really there. But the thing for me that gets me now is letters from kids. My heart goes into like a puddle. Like when people are like, how's your book doing? I'm like, here's my sales report. Some little girl wrote me and told me that, you know, she was feeling that way too, and it made her feel better or something, or it's amazing. That's everything. That's everything.
That's amazing. Mark, do you get any feedback? Do you get any letters or comments or feedback or emails from your work?
Oh, every day.
You do?
Day. Yes.
What kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah, you know, just the full gamut, you know. It depends. I mean, I've done so many different things that I get like letters about Heart of the City. I get letters from Leo. I get letters about Short and Skinny, and not Desmond Puckett so much anymore, but, you know, some of the things that you're moving on from. But I mean, it's just, you know, either compliments and complaints. I get both.
That's so interesting. You know, in an era where it's so easily accessible to the author, you can email, you can text, you can social media, you can DM.
Yeah, I put my website on everything, so people will go there, and then they all want to tell me what I'm doing wrong or what I'm doing right, and
people have a lot of opinions these days.
Yeah, it's like letters to the newspaper. Rob, do you get feedback on your stuff? Like Adam at Home, like initially, did you find that, you know, you were getting feedback on Adam at Home, and then you finally got feedback on what? Honestly, and I have to keep going back to this topic of people dealing with cancer and chemotherapy. Do you get letters from people saying, boy, this really helped me through the horrible chemical horribleness of chemo?
Yeah, I've run the gamut. When I took over Adam, it was, you know, around the time that the comments section went in on, and I got destroyed. I mean, my God, I got some of the worst. I was accused of drawing with my feet. And I would say it was not a smooth transition. It was like, but I finally feel, you know, that I've gotten somewhere to where I feel like Adam is kind of in my own. I've made it my own. So now I get comments, and actually most of them are pretty good. I mean, the comments section can be a brutal place.
I think the comment section generally is.
But yes, with the books, I will say, especially with Wink, the response I've gotten has been incredible, really, and it feels so. I wanted the book to be something that would help someone going through it, see that there's a way through it, and also see that, you know, humor can be a way through it, and it's just a different way to look at things while you're going through it. So, and the fact that it's done that, it's been amazing. Yeah. It's been incredible.
That's awesome. I mean, I think the word important again comes back in. It's more than one of the reviews. Important kind of came up as a key word, as what the book was doing. So I think that's amazing.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Terry, I want to ask you both if you had feedback from the books or the strip, and how that shaped your, you know, the process, but also what your actual physical process is. I know that you, like me, are a comic history nerd. You did art history. You love poring over originals and seeing how other people work. But I am very, very curious, as I'm sure many people watching are, as to what your process is on these books, digital, traditional, as well as what kind of feedback you're getting in the age of comment sections.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I know it's a loaded question.
Which is, I'll start with the easy question, which is the process. Oh, and by the way, I'm taking requests for room colors because I'd like to change mine out. So anyone who has any feedback.
I know someone who might be able to help you.
It's going to end up being hot pink or orange, so watch out.
Yeah, I've been living with
worse
for
colors.
about 15 years, so I need a change. But anyway, so my process, it's funny because the first book I mentioned, I did it it was a very freewheeling process that luckily came together. But with my second book, I kind of ran away from that. I decided I'm going to do this like with a lot of structure. So I ended up like creating. I ended up doing everything in rough art form, which was a complete mistake because I had to rewrite that book about 3 times or 4 times.
Really?
Like that. So I vowed I would never do that again. So now I kind of combine both processes. And so what I do is I now just, I used to write on a legal pad, but now I just type everything out in Word. And and it's almost like it's just a regular manuscript, and I just kind of hint at what the artwork's going to be. I just kind of put that in parentheses because I'm afraid of turning in any artwork before I know the manuscript is strong enough. And a lot of it is written, you know, like I said, like an illustrated novel, like is shown. And but then with the graphic novel, I write it kind of in a script format. And so then when I'm done, here I can show you what the manuscript kind of looks
by all
like.
means, please.
You can sort of just see here in parentheses. I mean, you know, you can't really read it, but you can see that I indicate where the art goes.
Huh.
And then eventually, when everything is approved, I pencil out roughs. This is just the rough art.
Wow.
And then I scan it all in and I insert it right into the manuscript.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, it's really anal. And,
No, it's good. It's a process. It's great.
And then I
Very
plug
orderly.
it in, and then it goes through more editing processes, and then I just go on to my Cintiq. It's all digital. I love working that way. I kind of found me when I discovered the digital drawing tablet. It's totally me. It feels so natural to me. Unlike
really?
I actually cannot do watercolors. I used to work with the Dr. Martin inks, and I loved it, but I don't know, maybe it's just my type A personality. Everything's got to be like really. So,
yeah, there's no guesswork. There's no guesswork with the Cintiq. You know, it's like, you know, your points are always going to be sharp. You know, your colors are always going to look good. You know, you're never going to run out of paper at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And all the above has happened to me. I mean, I used to fall in love with a pen, and then all of a sudden it would go south, and I couldn't find another one just like it. And then I was using brushes too. I was using Winsor & Newton Series 7s, number 2s, which were like $15 a pop. And when they started to, you know, now it's like, now I know I'm always going to have the same consistency. And I know the end of the world is coming, so that's going to be all out the window. So I'm going to be back to doing traditionally anyway. So I'm enjoying my digital kind.
Yeah. Me too.
Rob, do you work digitally or traditionally or a hybrid?
I work digitally. I mean, my process is when I write like Wayne or the Zarf books, my process is pretty much just like Terry's. I type in Word and leave myself exactly little parentheses telling myself what little joke I'm going to draw or what illustration I'm going to draw. But when I'm working on the strips or the you know, I go super loose. This is a graphic novel I'm doing right now. That's you know, I just split it into 2 pages, and so it's just got to be enough that I know what I'm doing, and then I go in and do a tighter sketch and the lettering. I'll ink the lettering and do the tighter sketch, and that's what I send to my editor. So, and then, you know, let's see if I can do this.
Wow, look at that. Is that a Cintiq? That looks like a 4K 22 HD.
You're on it.
Wow.
So, yeah, and then I do that's a Zarf illustration.
Oh, wow.
And then this is the new book I'm working on. It's about Bat Pig. He's a character out of the Wink book. So I'm doing a couple of graphic novels on that. So that's what these are. They're the beginnings of the pages there. And
wow.
So I'd say it's pretty similar to the rest of you guys.
Whether you're working digitally or in practical, as I would call it, you still make mistakes.
Of course
and
you do.
I sometimes I like the mistakes that I make digitally, and I keep them in there too. They're just a different kind of mistake, but you do make mistakes. for
Do
sure.
you have the same thing, Rob? Do you just leave the happy accidents in?
Yeah, absolutely. And with this new
Nice.
book that I'm doing, it's a little more like it's a character that my character in Wink drew. So I'm drawing it looser, and
Nice.
and I'm not cleaning up. I'm just kind of doing it really fast, and yeah, I'm amazed how much I'm liking doing that. I actually think the artwork kind of looks better because I'm not
Yeah, right.
over it. Yeah, I'm liking the looseness of it.
You're just kind of going with fate on this. You're just kind of going,
Yes.
you know what? That's how it looks, and that's how. Terry, it's so funny because you, to me, strike me as someone who's so controlled and orderly, and everything is like very clean. With Cintiq, you're working digitally. Are you finding that you're like leaning more towards like control and like structure? And do you have like a real rigid routine with this stuff?
I'll have you know that in this head, total chaos.
Yeah.
This is just me.
Neuroses.
All
Yeah.
my everything else. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know what it is. I really appreciate and love and admire everyone who can do that, who can let go.
Yes.
I find that when I do that, I just make a complete mess. So, and I don't know, I think I have like this very like graphic design kind of quality of me where I just like put things in boxes and I need structure and I need everything.
You like do you use guidelines in Photoshop?
Actually, I yes and no. Sometimes I kind of loose it up. Sometimes I do use guidelines.
Well,
But,
Maria, do you, when you scan stuff in, are you using guidelines to make sure everything kind of looks consistent when the scans come through and like the black point is the same on everything?
Yeah, well, I have the frame of the comic is digital, so the literal outlines there. So I kind of drop it in and then do a layer mask and cut out the parts that aren't there. And I have this cool. I learned a really cool process of scanning, and it's this whole like 5-step formula of curves, levels, all these things that I would run through to get the colors consistent and really pop.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I mean, I've been doing my comic digitally for years, so I may work toward that with this next one. Just that was harder, of course, because there's so much more to do with watercolor and cleaning, and I wanted things to be loose, but also neatened up at times. So then there was a ton of cleanup that went in. So I like both. I mean, I really love both for different projects. I think call for different media, and I love all of my art supplies too. So I really like experimenting with both. And I love my Cintiq and I love my iPad. Like I kind of want all of it. So there's your big.
Well, it's kind of whatever the project calls for, right?
Yeah.
Mark, I love looking at your little sketch pad. It looks like a small spiral bound notebook.
Yes, I bought this because it's the size of this. This is the size that a book would actually end up being.
Yeah.
So
good idea.
When the illustrations are relative to how they would look in the actual published version.
Exactly.
So, and that's exactly what I want to see, because I have a real problem when I work bigger, that I think, well, I can put more stuff in here because it's bigger. It ends up looking like, it doesn't work. So, and I guess there's something about me that I just have to draw to size. Well, there are a lot of guys like Kazu Kazuki. We talked about Kazu Kabushi.
The flight anthologies,
He could draw 4 pages of layout on one 8.5 by 11 sheet and know exactly how it was going to do. And then he would write his script on his iPhone. And I mean, I tried doing that. I mean, literally all I do on my phone is just notes to myself. Like I have tons and tons and tons of ideas. That's native on my phone and in the cloud, which will ultimately be gone too. Did I mention the end of the world?
Do you do that as well, Rob? I feel like that's like
all of the crutches will be gone. Just prepare yourself. All the crutches will be gone. It's going to go back to world made by hand, and we're all going to have to learn how to use pencils again. But that's the one thing I do. I mean, I will actually write my story out longhand with pencils in a pad and then never look at it again. It's just so I know what it is. It's once I write it out, it lives in my head. But if I go back and start looking at what I wrote, it forces, I don't feel like the story's as organic as I start to actually write it.
That's so
when it
interesting.
actually starts to
Rob,
happen.
do you write it out by hand as well?
I do.
No,
the
no,
whole thing.
I type.
You
I
use
type.
Word,
Well,
right?
No, when I do a graphic novel, I do it like this.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, you do it by
Yeah.
hand, right?
Oh yeah, it's all by hand. It's just
Yeah.
scribbled in there,
Right.
and then
Something about seeing it in
when-
the real world, right?
yeah, right. But and the one thing I will do that's like what Maria was doing there. I love note cards, and so I will write all the scenes on note cards and then lay them out on a big table. And I've done that when I get really stuck in a story on how to visualize the whole thing. I'll start moving things around and realize, this is going to work better as a flashback here, that kind of thing. So,
No kidding.
yeah, I do a lot of that.
Yeah, it's nice to see it big, but also like as Mark mentions, when you work to scale, you're less tempted to put an extraneous detail when you know that it's going to be either reduced or work to scale. Like a trick that I embarrassingly only discovered this year or in the last year was using index cards to figure out panels and gag cartoons, because they get reduced so much now that if you put extraneous detail in, it's going to get lost anyway in the reduction. So you better just put the essentials in. It forces you to put just what you need in and nothing else, which
That's a good
sounds
idea.
simple. It's a lifetime skill that you develop.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why I love the fact that, Mark, you use a smaller spiral bound notebook.
That's why, because I want to get as close as to what I'm actually going to end up seeing, and it also keeps me from putting too many panels and too many words. I tend to get verbose, and so it keeps me, from doing that. So,
well, this is at high risk of devolving into the kind of conversation that cartoonists have at every hotel bar at the Reuben Awards, as you all know. So I'm going to have to tie this off regretfully. We've gone over 30 minutes more than we thought we would, purely selfishly, because I just wanted to hear all of you talk about your process. And I'm so grateful for your time, as I'm sure everyone watching is. If there's anything additional that we haven't covered or anything additional that you want to say before we go, now would be the time. And I'd really appreciate you all I'm going to start with you, Mark, go to Maria, Terry, then Rob. Mark, is there any final thing that you want to say before we go?
I got nothing. I'm spent.
That's your epitaph? That's what you're going to put on your headstone?
Yeah.
No, my epitaph is going to be, thank God, no more deadlines. That's it.
Maria, what would you like to say goodbye?
I think that one of the most fascinating parts of the process for me has been really what I've learned about myself by writing the books. And there's this incredible healing process that happens in the process of creating, I guess, any art, but in these books in particular, and I think because it had a lot to do with my own life growing up, it's just amazing what you sort of reveal about your own personality and insight. So I guess that's the last thing I could say.
I love that. Thank you for that insight. And Terry, any final words you'd like to share?
I would say read all our books because they're all awesome. And I'm just waiting for the final moment where we could flash everybody goodbye because we're not wearing pants.
Believe me, I built that into the time, but I feel like we've gone over. And honestly, I was waiting for Rob to crack out a nice solo on his Fender Stratocaster in the background there.
Absolutely.
We're out of time. I'm so sorry you can't crack out some Hendrix. But Rob, is there anything that you or the lovely Amber I don't know if she's in the background.
Well, thanks for having us here. And then I also just want to say, if there is anybody watching who wants to do this, again, I said it earlier, I think the most important thing is just start doing it. I mean, just sit down and start writing and you'll surprise yourself. It's amazing. Like next thing you know, you get wrapped up in the story and you want to go sit down for 4 hours and write. So just get after it. Would be my advice.
No, this is good. This is all amazing advice, and we're so grateful for all of you and your experiences and sharing it. If nothing else, we've learned that taking insanity and putting it on the page is an invaluable lesson, as well as Maria's Darwin Awards with hair dryers.
Yeah, don't do it.
Yeah, please don't do that. I want to put that out as a PSA, as well as the word autobiofictionography, which ought to be in the
Linda
Open
Berry.
Dictionary if it isn't already.
Yep.
And the fact that, childhood is a dark time. I don't know if you guys have read Short and Skinny.
Yes,
What a
yes,
fantastic
pain,
chronicle.
pain and fear. That's where art
Pain is funny.
It's
Pain is
terribly
funny.
funny. It's
Pain takes time.
It's the only thing that's real in our lives. When you think you're going to die, that's when you wake up.
Yeah. Some of the funniest things that'll ever happen to you are when you're using a hairdryer to dry watercolor paintings. What I'd like to do is finally thank you all so much. Mark Tertulli, Maria Scrivan, Terry Lubinson, and Rob Harrell. What an incredible session this has been. Thank you all so much for contributing to what we hoped was going to be a live panel in Kansas City, Missouri for the 74th Annual Reuben Awards. That has now been the inaugural, I guess, NCS Fest online. Hopefully not annual, but a replacement to what we usually do when we're hanging out in person. And hopefully next year we get to all do this in person and talk shop about NIMS and Wacom tableting. I want to thank you all so much for today, and best of luck. I know you're a few more seconds over deadline next to this, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.